I do, and actually, that's, I guess I could acknowledge that I was right in Hawaii. But I also, I know, thank goodness.
I forgot.
Well, and it's actually a good thing because I had an extra $10 today and I gave it to Gary to get Paul Harris. And so I don't have any more money for it, so I donated $10 to Paul for it. Hopefully that'll cover it. We had a great time. All right, and I'm glad to be home. So, this morning, thank you, good morning everybody. I'd like to introduce Dr. Peter Phillips, who's a professor of sociology at Sonoma State University, and was the director of Project Censored from 1976 to 2000. He's currently the president of the board, the Media Freedom Foundation, Project Censored. Professor Phillips teaches classes in investigative sociology, sociology of power, political sociology, and sociology of media, and has published 14 editions of Censored, Media and Democracy in Action, from 7 Stories Press. He co-hosts the Project Censored show on Pacific Radio, and locally you can hear that on KPFA, and is a frequent writer and blogger on numerous sites worldwide. And so please help me welcome Dr. Peter Phillips.
How did the Gulf of Tonkin get in on this? Because it's well known now at this point that North Vietnam did not attack our forces. And it was used by Johnson to get Congress to go ahead and approve expanded operations in Vietnam. This is one of the, what we call state crimes against democracy. Kind of like weapons of mass destruction. Remember the name? Remember the name? Yes. So Project Censored has been around since 1976. We're 38 years into it. Dr. Carl Jensen was the founder, and he was teaching a class on media, and the students asked him, well, how come Nixon got elected when Watergate happened? And they went back and looked at the newspapers, and Watergate, even though it was known, corporate media basically ignored it until after the election, and so it was kind of a cover-up. And so they started thinking, well, I wonder what else the corporate media isn't covering. And they started producing they did a press release first, and then we've been doing the books now for over 20 years. And it got picked up in independent press all over the country. Probably our longtime favorite is the San Francisco Bay Guardian, which their last edition was the featured edition of Project Censored. They are no longer in business, which is very sad. But they would write the story and it would end up in the weeklies all over the country. And that's how I first heard about it. And when I got to Sonoma State in '94, 21 years ago now, Carl was ready to retire. I mean, he's been doing it for a long time. And he had read in the student newspaper, I was a news faculty member, and that I had done my dissertation on the Bohemian Club. And invited me to lunch and said, well, how would you like to take over Project Censored? I thought about it for a bit and accepted. And it's been quite a journey since. 5 years ago, we really expanded to other campuses. We now have 25 campuses involved. Last year, over 50 faculty members helped participate in writing the Censored 2015 book. Over 250 students contributed stories that were evaluated and reviewed. So we've really grown and branched out. The director now is Mickey Huff from Diablo Valley College, who is a Petaluma, and Andy Lee Roth, who's down in Claremont, is associate director. Another one to do the heavy lifting. I get the book out each year. Part of our process, though, is I'm teaching a media class right now, and the students will go out and look at independent media. And they start right at our website because we link to hundreds of independent media sites. And they're looking for news stories they're interested in. And the first thing they're going to do is find a story, we'll clear them and say, yeah, sounds like a good topic. Could be environmental, could be political, could be anything. And they will search that story. They'll go into the Nexus Lexis databases, ProQuest, and see if that story was covered in the corporate media. That's step one. Step two is if it wasn't covered, then they go find a faculty member on campus, or could be a community expert in the field, to review the story and say, is this story accurate? So this is the initial screening process. We need somebody with a PhD or somebody who's an expert in a certain area to say, yes, this story looks like it's an accurate story. From there, they'll write a summary of it, a synopsis, 150 words, cite with sources, put in the URL, their name, the faculty member's name, and that's posted on our website. So we do that year round. Last year we posted over almost 300 stories. We just posted a dozen last week that my students did. They're coming in from other campuses all over. And that list of stories, in eightfold, all the class, all the faculty members, and all the students will vote on them. Say which one's the most important. And that's how the acidification of the ocean ended up being the #1 story in the 2015 yearbook. How the pH levels are changing. Shellfish are dying. This is global. This is a very, very serious issue. So that becomes the #1 story, gets the most attention throughout the year. And then we collectively write the entire book in about 3 months. So the top 25 stories are written up. Susan Rahman at Marine College always does a follow-up on the Deja Vu stories. She's a local. She lives right up here, so that's cool. And we put together by June 15th. By July 15th, it's edited and reviewed, and it's available for sale in September, or right around the 1st of September. And that's an annual process. We have the title is 2015. It comes out like an almanac. So it comes out in September of 2014. And we just had a big book release party. Copperfield was our first one this year in Petaluma. And then we just had a big release party at Moe's in Berkeley. And then Monday night we were at Lagunitas, and a lot of the students came, all of the faculty writers and that locally came, and we had a big party in Lagunitas on Monday night. Over 200 people came. These are fundraisers for us. That's how we make money. We sell books. People go on our website and sign up for getting our newsletters and that sort of thing. We have about 250 people that contribute $5 to $10 a month. So that covers the website, covers our webmaster. And we put out appeals for donations about 3 times a year on the internet. Mail got too expensive. I used to send out 6,000 letters asking for people to donate, and it kind of got so that we were breaking even on those things. So the internet, we really moved into just using the internet for fundraising and expansion. Our budget's less than 100,000. I mean, we're all paid faculty members. Students are all volunteers. The overhead is, it'd be nice to have some full-time staff or something, but we're not there. But we're certainly there in terms of a presence on the internet. Hundreds of thousands of unique views a month. People are looking at this all over the country. The book is used as a textbook. And we're really working with young people. This is about critical thinking. This is about finding out what you're not being told, literally, by the corporate media. When we started the project, there were 15 major media corporations in the United States. That's pretty much what was documented. And people kind of were, wow, that's not that many, that's pretty narrow. And Ben Beck was chronicling those. He was the former editor of the Washington Post, and then was the dean of the School of Journalism at Berkeley. And he was writing a book called Media Monopoly, and he did a couple, 3 versions of that. And it got down to 10 major media corporations in the U.S., and now it's down to about 6. So that consolidation, that really concentration of where most of the people in the country get their news and information. So how many people in here read a daily newspaper? Right, a lot of you. Now, if this was a class of young people, and we asked that question, many times there's no hands. 0. I asked this question at Sierra College the other day. I gave a talk up there, about 50 kids. Free. Young people don't read newspapers. They're on the internet. They're relatively well informed. They certainly don't know much about what's going on in the area because they're out of the area. But They do see a whole lot on the internet. They get a lot of tweets and they get a lot of information and news on the internet. And then, of course, when they sign up and they're involved in Project Sensor, we're constantly doing internet feeds and information about processes. So I'm not thinking that students are any less informed than we are. It's just that the newspapers aren't the way they're doing it. And that's an important thing to know. It's an important thing to think about as to how we're going to reach young people, what they're doing. I've had around 1,500 students in the last 20 years that have been involved in Project Sensor. And they're critical thinkers. They know how to find news on independent sources. One guy in our new movie, I can't remember the guy on the right here, was a student of mine in 1996. He found a friend. They put some money together from the family, and they made this movie about Project Sensor. It's their production. It came out about a year ago. They won Best Director at the International Film Festival in Madrid. And they've been in film festivals and keep showing. So it's a nice summary of what we do with some of the issues that we play with and why, and what's important. It's really about critical thinking and really knowing what's going on. And corporate media today is not giving us very much. It's essentially entertainment, what we call junk food news, what celebrities are doing. It's blood and murder and gossip. But it's not really talking, particularly in terms of foreign policy. It really doesn't talk about domestic issues that much either. So massive inequalities of wealth, the realities of unemployment, these sorts of issues are simply ignored. And probably the most significant story that, and the one that I have to keep talking about, is when we invaded Iraq. And Richard Clark, former National Security Advisor, saying that we should be indicting the president at that time for being a war criminal. When we invaded Iraq, the death rates in the community went up massively. And there have been 3 national surveys done, two by Johns Hopkins University, both published in the Lancet Medical Journal. So these were peer-reviewed research studies where they went out and surveyed families throughout the country. Have you lost a loved one because of war? And how did it happen? And they're able to determine that in 2003, there was about 100,000 new deaths. By 2006, there were over 600,000 deaths, and by 2008, over 1 million. And half of these people died by U.S. military action, usually by firefights either in a city or aerial bombing. That's over 1 million people, probably 1.5 million today. And that's mass, it's a mass slaughter. And those are just the people that died. 5 million were forced out of their homes. Many more were wounded or both physically and mentally. It's a massive destruction of that society. And now there's permanent radioactivity and pollution there. 1/3 of the children born in pollution today have a birth defect. It's just horrendous. And that kind of slaughter, it's not out there. The Washington Post has never acknowledged more than 100,000 deaths. That's the official count. And they claim that's from counting up the ones that were reported in newspapers. Well, you do a national survey, and you ask people, and they tell you, and you do it 3 times, it's pretty darn accurate. And so that's the magnitude that we're dealing with here. And it's, from my Catholic tradition, sinful in a very real way. So, and we've known all along that when you put young people in the field and they're scared, that some really awful things happen. We knew in 2005, and the ACLU had acquired autopsy reports of civilians who had died while in U.S. custody in Iraq and Afghanistan, multiple sites. They got 42 autopsy reports. They had to sue the government to get it. And then Congress changed it so you can't get it anymore. But the autopsy reports we got in 2005, those people half of them, the cause of death described by U.S. medical doctors doing the autopsy was a homicide. That they were killed while in custody. The other half, they said, it was primarily heart failure. All of the bodies had extensive damage. Extensive, massive torture, evidence of torture. Now this story came out in 2005. It was released from ACLU. You can still see it on their webpage, last time I looked. The reports are all there. And this was absolute positive proof that we were torturing people that happened inside multiple sites in Afghanistan and Iraq. Yet, corporate media just looked the other way. And it wasn't like they didn't know, because AP put a story out. Every single newspaper in this country, every radio station, television station had a copy of that AP report. We searched it. 17 newspapers covered the story. Seattle Times buried it in a much bigger story about what was going on at that time. LA Times had it. The PD actually had it. So there was one of the very few. And then it's never mentioned again. It's mentioned one time and that's it. So Obama last year, he apologized. Yeah, we did some things we shouldn't have done. And there was overzealousness and there was some, he didn't use the word torture, but enhanced interrogation probably wasn't correct. But we knew that 10 years ago. And certainly independent media knew it. And so what we're faced with here is a corporate media that is so embedded in the international power structure that they're getting their news from the Pentagon, the White House, the State Department. And that's considered the only viable sources. So Noam Chomsky and various other people that address these kinds of issues just simply aren't included in news today. And that's a vital part of understanding why we're so complacent around some of these issues. We just don't really realize, or when we hear something, we say, oh, well, that can't be. We would never do that. So in 2004 election, all the statisticians and books that have written about that now show that there was an 8 million vote discrepancy between what the voting machine said and what the exit poll said. You do an exit poll, and it was 24,000 people who were interviewed, puts you in the 98th percentile of accuracy. And you ask somebody who they just vote for president, it's not likely they're going to get it wrong. If you ask them who they're going to vote for in a week, it may not be accurate. If you ask them who they just voted for that day, 8 million votes spread out across the country. That gave Bush a plurality of votes. Even in California, where Kerry won, it was a million, there was over 8% discrepancy. That was a stolen election. Bush was not elected in 94. I mean 2004. He wasn't elected in 2000 either. Now that we went back and started counting the votes, the hanging chads and all of that in Florida. So I can say with all confidence that George W. Bush was never elected to the presidency of the United States. And I would back that up statistically and with valid information. But no corporate media will ever say that. They would never talk about voting machine manipulation. We're the freest country in the world. In democracy, nobody would cheat. I'm sorry, we got cheated. And we need to know it. And the voter purges and things that have been happening in the most recent election, Greg Palast has been writing about that. The identification laws that states have implemented, the cross-checking for names of felons, that's massive now. Going over 26 states, they're talking 500,000 people being excluded from voting in the last round. So there's some serious issues in our country. Very serious in the sense of knowing what's really going on. Being aware of sources of news and information that can tell us what the corporate media is not telling us. And I always get asked the question, well, what are good sources of news? And certainly I'm biased towards KPFA, where I volunteer once a week. As a fairly good news source, although I always agree with all the stuff they're carrying. But Democracy Now! Is very good. Tom Harkin is very good. And Russia Today is like the old BBC. They're pretty darn accurate about news. And they will tell you things that you haven't heard elsewhere. Al Jazeera is really good. Al Jazeera just did a big report on the USS Liberty. How many vets here know about the USS Liberty? Where it was the ship that was attacked by the Israelis in the '67 war. U.S. Spy ship attacked for over a day. A third of the people on board killed. Another third wounded. Covered up by the Johnson administration. Like we just never heard about it, but there's a full documentary of the vets. I've interviewed some of those vets. They had a flag the size of that back wall there. The Israelis knew exactly who they were attacking. So those are the kinds of stories that we often don't hear. Those are the stories that we need to know. And we're one place that tries to do that. We really address those issues and think about what's important, what needs to be covered, and we're academic about it. So we'll address issues a lot of people just shy away from. There's a very serious problem with why a full 55-story steel frame building built down on 9/11. That was building 7. When hit by an airplane, it was still down in total footprint. 5:20 that day. And it's completely unexplainable, other than there were controlled demolitions in it. So, I mean, when those things are so glaring in your face, you really have to step back and say, well, what else aren't we being told? And not just, be the ostrich with our heads in sand. And take a hard look at what's really happening. I said I would stop and take questions if there's any questions you'd like to ask. Yes?
What is, and presumably you talked a little bit about cable communications.
Cable communications?
Cable communications and the internet and so forth, and the various efforts being made to democratize and that avenue of information. And do you have any comments on that?
Well, glad that Obama come out in support of internet freedom, so that people can go to any websites. They won't be restricted, and there won't be tiered services of access. The private companies have been wanting to, for a long time, be able to sell you different packages where you get this much of the internet, or you get the big thing, you get the entertainment stuff, but you wouldn't reach Project Censored, you might not reach Al Jazeera or something like that. So we're glad to see that that's taking place, but there's still a great effort to try to narrow it down and control access to a variety of places. Yeah.
I know time's a little bit short, but can you fill us in anything about the Gulf of Tonkin and the resolution from 1964 that we don't know about already?
Well, it depends what you know, but we were doing provocative intrusions in the North Vietnamese waters. Go in, go out, go in, go out. They had patrol boats. It was a cat and mouse game, which we do often. And them actually attacking our destroyers is not true. In both instances that happened. McNamara has now admitted that. They accepted the reports as if, and then they used that to expand bombing in North Vietnam and increase the number of troops there.
Oh, well, okay. Well, that I knew already, but anyway.
Okay, I'm glad you did.
Okay.
A lot of people don't.
You mentioned Al Jazeera. Is that Al Jazeera America?
Well, Al Jazeera America, yeah, it is part of Al Jazeera. And it's their English, just like Russia Today is all over the world, but it's their English version. And they carried them for a while as a news source. But about 6 years ago, Qatar really put some restraints on them in favor of not being so critical of the U.S. efforts worldwide. And so a lot of the folks that have been there left. But it's still an independent news source that we consider very important.
You can download an app on your smartphone. Your app.
Since you're more in touch with young students, of course they are the college level students. In terms of acquiring information, in the old days, I grew up in New York City, I had 3 papers we read every day, but we're still limited and filtered in terms of news. Are young people curious enough to get differing sources using their media, which, you know, we're old people, we do it our way, the way it's been done.
Well, they're required in my class to read independent media and report on a news story weekly, all my classes. I wish more faculty members did that. A lot of our faculty members in the network do. But for the most part, they're like a lot of people, they're just not very well informed about what's really going on.
But
Because they couldn't tell you which side, what was going on in the Congo, or what really happened in Haiti, or the depth of drugs flowing out of Colombia and or Afghanistan today. I mean, the Taliban has eliminated all growing of heroin, and
are they more likely to filter or look at the information, see the quality of what they're getting? Because you can put a question, you can get the conspiracy theorist newsletter that will come up with news stories.
they're actually, I think, in many ways, have access to more information than we ever did. I mean, I would read 2 or 3 newspapers a day. I just kind of grew up with it. But the internet access, I'm not sure how organized they are about it. That's what we try to get them to be. It's better organized. They do have sources. They go to our website to find 25 independent daily news sources with more headlines and stuff covering issues all over the world than there are in the New York Times. So we try to encourage that kind of behavior. But that's what young people anywhere. But to say they're any less informed than we are. I think that the nation as a whole is less informed than we were 30 or 40 years ago. Because it's primarily entertainment today. So instead of having multiple sources of news, we really only have 1 or 2. Because they all look pretty much the same.
Thank you very much. That was not only interesting, but sobering.
Okay.
I have a bottle of wine for you, which I'll get in just a moment.
Okay.
And I have a small task, if I could ask you. We have a door prize,
All right.
and they get a small amount of change this time. But you can draw one of those tickets. Just read the last 4 digits.
1364.
Well, we'll try that. One once.
It's over here.
1353.
1352.
1353.
1353.
1353 is over here too.
Sorry about that. All right, third time always works.
1368.
First of all, it's excellent. Thank you very much.
I have a few of the books here that we're still applying.
Okay. Yeah, the books are over there on the counter.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
So, well, you got a lot of cards to choose from. We're just starting to do that here. And all you want is to take oops. Well, thanks for playing. And you got this beautiful set of flowers. Thanks for Dawn's present bringing that.
One of my favorite things.
give us Chuck Tilbury.
Thank you. Read it.
Glasses and microphone.
All right. Brace yourselves. Okay, so a woman's husband dies. He had $20,000 to his name. It's an old joke apparently. $20,000. After everything is done at the funeral home and the cemetery, the woman tells her closest friend that there's just no money left. The friend says, "How can that be? He told me he had $20,000 a few days before he died. How can he be broke?" The widow says, "Well, the funeral cost me about $6,500, and of course, I had to make the obligatory donation for the church and the organist and all. That was $500. I spent another $500 for the wake, food and drinks, you know. The rest went for the memorial stone." And it says, $12,500 for the memorial stone? My God, how big was it? The widow says, 3 carats.